The Three Little Birds by the Brothers Grimm. About 1,000 or more years ago, there were in this country nothing but small kings. One of them, who lived on the Kuderberg, was very fond of hunting. One day, as he was riding forth from his castle with his huntsmen, three girls were watching their cows on the mountain. When they saw the king with all his followers, the eldest girl pointed to him and called to the two other girls, "If I do not get that one, I will have none." The second girl from the other side of the hill then pointed to the man who was on the king's right hand and said, "Hilloa, Hilloa, if I do not get him, I will have no one." These men, however, were the king's two ministers. The king overheard their conversation, and upon returning from the chase, he had the three girls brought before him. He asked them what they had said the previous day on the mountain. They refused to tell him. So the king asked the eldest if she would take him as her husband. She answered, "Yes." And the two ministers married the other two sisters, for all three girls were fair and beautiful, especially the queen, who had hair like flax. However, the two sisters had no children. When the king was obliged to leave home, he invited them to stay with the queen to cheer her, as she was about to bear a child. She gave birth to a little boy who had a bright red star on his forehead. Envious, the two sisters decided to throw the beautiful boy into the water. They cast him into the Weser, I believe, and immediately a little bird flew up into the air and sang, "To thy death art thou sped, until God's word be said. In the white lily bloom, brave boy, is thy tomb." Upon hearing this, the two sisters were terrified and fled in great haste. When the king returned home, they told him that the queen had given birth to a dog. The king, trusting in fate, remarked, "What God does is well done." A fisherman who lived near the water found the little boy still alive. Since his wife had no children, they raised the boy as their own. A year later, when the king was away again, the queen gave birth to another little boy. The envious sisters threw this child into the water as well. Once more, a little bird flew up and sang, "To thy death art thou sped, until God's word be said. In the white lily bloom, brave boy, is thy tomb." When the king returned, the sisters again lied, claiming that the queen had given birth to another dog. He repeated, "What God does is well done." However, the fisherman saved this second boy too, and raised him. Once more, the king journeyed away, and the queen gave birth to a little girl. The false sisters threw her into the water as well. Again, a little bird flew up and sang, "To thy death art thou sped, until God's word be said. In the white lily bloom, bonny girl, is thy tomb." When the king came home, the sisters told him that the queen had given birth to a cat. Enraged, the king ordered his wife to be imprisoned, where she remained for many long years. Meanwhile, the children had grown up. One day, the eldest son went out with some other boys to fish, but they would not allow him to join them and said, "Go thy way, foundling." Troubled by this, he asked the old fisherman if it was true. The fisherman confessed that he had once fished him out of the water. The boy decided to go forth and seek his father. The fisherman entreated him to stay, but the boy was determined and would not be hindered. Eventually, the fisherman relented. The boy set out and walked for many days until he came to a vast body of water. By its side stood an old woman fishing. "Good day, mother," said the boy. "Many thanks," she said. "You will fish for a long time before you catch anything. You will also seek for a long time before you find your father. How will you get over the water?" asked the woman. "God knows," replied the boy. Then the old woman lifted him onto her back and carried him across the water. He searched for a long time but could not find his father. A year later, the second boy set out to find his brother. He came to the same water, and his journey mirrored his brother's. This left only the daughter at home. She mourned deeply for her brothers and eventually begged the fisherman to let her go in search of them as well. The maiden arrived at the large body of water and greeted the old woman with, "Good day, mother." "Many thanks," replied the old woman. "May God help you with your fishing," said the girl. Pleased by the maiden's kind words, the old woman became quite friendly. She carried the girl over the water and gave her a wand. "Go, my daughter, ever onwards by this road," instructed the old woman. "When you come to a great black dog, you must pass it silently and boldly, without laughing or looking at it. Next, you will reach a great high castle. On its threshold, let the wand fall and walk straight through the castle, out to the other side. There, you will find an old fountain from which a large tree has grown. Hanging in the tree is a bird in a cage. Take it down and also fill a glass with water from the fountain. With these two things, return by the same route. Pick up the wand from the threshold and carry it with you. When you pass by the dog again, strike it in the face with the wand, making sure to hit it. Then, come back here to me. The maiden followed the old woman's instructions precisely. On her way back, she found her two brothers who had been searching for each other across half the world. They accompanied her to the place where the black dog lay on the road. She struck it in the face, and it transformed into a handsome prince. The prince joined them as they made their way to the river, where the old woman was still waiting. She was overjoyed to see them again and carried all of them across the water. Her task complete, she then disappeared, for she was now freed. The reunited siblings returned to the old fisherman, and all rejoiced in finding each other again. They hung the bird's cage on the wall. However, the second son could not settle at home. He took his crossbow and went hunting. When he grew tired, he played music on his flute. The king, who was also hunting, heard the music and approached the youth. "Who has given you leave to hunt here?" the king demanded. "No one," the boy replied. "To whom do you belong, then?" "I am the fisherman's son, but he has no children. If you do not believe me, come with me." The king followed the boy and questioned the fisherman, who revealed everything. At that moment, the little bird on the wall began to sing. "The mother sits alone. There in the prison small, O king of royal blood, these are thy children all. The sisters twain so false, they wrought the children woe, there in the waters deep, where the fishermen come and go." Terrified, the king took the bird, the fisherman, and the three children back to his castle. He ordered the prison to be opened and his wife to be brought out. She had become ill and weak, but the daughter gave her some of the fountain water, which restored her strength and health. As for the two false sisters, they were punished by being burnt. The daughter married the prince, and they all lived happily ever after. The Water of Life, a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there was a king who was gravely ill, and no one believed that he would survive. He had 3 sons who were deeply distressed about this. They went down into the palace garden and wept. There, they encountered an old man who inquired about the reason for their sorrow. The princes explained that their father was so ill that he was on the brink of death, for nothing seemed to cure him. The old man then said, "I know of one last remedy, the water of life. If he drinks it, he will recover. However, it is difficult to find." The eldest son replied, "I will find it," and went to the ailing king, begging for permission to seek the water of life, as it alone could save him. The king initially refused, saying, "The danger is too great. I would rather die." After much pleading, the king finally consented. The prince thought to himself, "If I bring the water, I will be my father's most beloved and inherit the kingdom." He set out on his journey. After riding for a short while, a dwarf appeared in the road and called out, "Where are you going so fast?" The prince haughtily responded, "That is none of your business, silly shrimp," and rode on. The dwarf, angered by the prince's arrogance, cursed him. Soon the prince entered a ravine. The further he rode, the narrower the mountains closed in, until the path became so tight that he could no longer advance. It was impossible to turn his horse or dismount, and he was trapped as if in a prison. The sick king waited for a long time, but the eldest son never returned. The second son then said, "Father, let me go forth to seek the water," thinking, "If my brother is dead, the kingdom will be mine." The king was reluctant at first, but eventually allowed him to go. The second prince followed the same path his brother had taken and also encountered the dwarf. When the dwarf asked where he was hurrying to, the prince dismissed him, saying, "Little shrimp, that is none of your concern," and rode on without another glance. Enraged, the dwarf bewitched him as well, causing him to enter a ravine where he too was trapped, unable to move forward or backward. Such is the fate of the arrogant. With the second son also missing, the youngest son begged for permission to go and fetch the water. The king, having no other choice, reluctantly let him go. When the youngest son met the dwarf and was asked where he was going in such a rush, he stopped and respectfully explained, "I am seeking the water of life because my father is near death." The dwarf asked, "Do you know where to find it?" The prince admitted he did not. "Since you have behaved with courtesy and not haughtily like your deceitful brothers, I will guide you. The water of life springs from a fountain in the courtyard of an enchanted castle. However, you will not be able to reach it unless I give you an iron wand and 2 small loaves of bread. Strike the castle's iron door thrice with the wand, and it will open. Inside, you will find 2 lions with gaping jaws. Throw a loaf to each, and they will become docile. Then, hurry and fetch some of the water before the clock strikes 12, or the door will shut, and you will be trapped inside." The prince thanked him, took the wand and the bread, and set off on his journey. When he arrived at the castle, everything was exactly as the dwarf had described. He struck the iron door thrice with the wand, and it opened. After calming the lions with the bread, he entered the castle and came to a grand and splendid hall. There, he found enchanted princes, from whom he took the rings off their fingers. He also found a sword and a loaf of bread, which he took with him. After this, he entered a chamber where a beautiful maiden awaited him. She rejoiced upon seeing him, kissed him, and told him that he had freed her. She promised him her entire kingdom and said that if he returned in a year, they would celebrate their wedding. Additionally, she revealed the location of the spring containing the water of life and urged him to draw some of it before the clock struck 12. He continued onwards and eventually entered a room with a beautiful, newly made bed. Exhausted, he decided to rest for a while and soon fell asleep. When he woke up, it was 11:45. Startled, he sprang up, rushed to the spring, filled a cup with the water, and hurried away. As he was passing through the iron door, the clock struck 12. The door slammed shut violently, catching his heel and cutting away a piece of it. Despite this injury, he was overjoyed to have obtained the water of life and headed homewards, passing by the dwarf once again. Upon seeing the sword and the loaf, the dwarf remarked, "With these, you have gained great wealth. The sword will allow you to slay entire armies, and the bread will never be exhausted." The prince, however, did not want to return to his father without his brothers. He asked the dwarf, "Dear dwarf, can you tell me where my 2 brothers are?" "They left before I did in search of the water of life and have not returned." The dwarf replied, "They are imprisoned between 2 mountains. I condemned them because of their arrogance." The prince pleaded until the dwarf agreed to release them, but warned him, "Beware of them, for they have bad hearts." When his brothers were freed, the prince rejoiced and shared his adventures with them. He told them that he had found the water of life, brought a cupful back, and rescued a beautiful princess who had promised to wait a year for him. Their wedding would be celebrated, and he would gain a great kingdom. The 3 brothers then rode on together and came to a land suffering from war and famine. The king of this land believed he was doomed because of the severe scarcity. The prince gave him the loaf, which fed and satisfied the entire kingdom. He also gave the king the sword, with which he defeated his enemies, allowing his people to live in peace. Afterward, the prince reclaimed the loaf and the sword, and the brothers continued their journey. In their travels, they encountered 2 more countries plagued by war and famine. Each time, the prince provided the loaf and the sword to the respective kings, thus saving 3 kingdoms. They then boarded a ship and sailed across the sea. During the voyage, the 2 eldest brothers spoke privately. They conspired against the youngest, saying, "Our youngest brother has found the water of life, and our father will grant him the kingdom that belongs to us. He will rob us of all our fortune." They plotted to destroy him. When they found him fast asleep, they poured the water of life from his cup and replaced it with salt seawater. Upon returning home, the youngest son offered his cup to the ailing king, hoping it would cure him. However, the king became even worse after drinking a little of the salt seawater. While he lamented his condition, the 2 eldest brothers arrived and accused the youngest of attempting to poison their father. They presented the true water of life, which they had taken, to the king. After tasting it, the king's illness vanished, and he regained his strength and health as in his youth. Later, The eldest brothers mocked the youngest, saying, "You may have found the water of life, but we reap the reward. You should have been more vigilant. We took it from you while you slept at sea. When a year has passed, one of us will fetch the beautiful princess. If you dare reveal any of this to our father, he will not trust you, and you will lose your life. Keep silent, and you shall be spared." The old king was furious with his youngest son, believing he had plotted against his life. Consequently, he summoned the court and had a secret sentence pronounced. The prince was to be executed. One day, while the prince was riding out on a hunt, suspecting no harm, the king's huntsman accompanied him. Deep in the forest, the huntsman's sorrowful demeanor caught the prince's attention. He asked, "Dear huntsman, what troubles you?" The huntsman hesitated before responding. "I cannot tell you, although I should." The prince reassured him. "Speak freely, I will forgive you." With a heavy heart, the huntsman revealed, "Alas, I am ordered to shoot you dead by the king's command." Shocked, the prince pleaded, "Dear huntsman, spare my life. I will give you my royal garments, and you can give me your common ones instead." The huntsman readily agreed, saying, "I will do so willingly, for I could not have brought myself to shoot you." They exchanged clothes, and the huntsman returned home. Meanwhile, the prince ventured deeper into the forest. After some time, 3 wagons filled with gold and precious stones arrived at the king's palace, intended for his youngest son. These were sent by the 3 kings, who had defeated their enemies with the prince's sword and fed their people with his bread. They wished to express their gratitude. Upon receiving this news, the old king pondered, "Could my son have been innocent?" He expressed his remorse to his court. "If only he were still alive. It grieves me deeply that I ordered his death." The huntsman then confessed, "He is still alive. I couldn't fulfill your command," and recounted the events as they happened. Relief washed over the king, and he decreed that his son was welcome to return and be restored to favor. Meanwhile, the princess had a golden road constructed leading up to her palace. She instructed her attendants that anyone who rode straight along this road to her would be her true suitor and should be admitted. Conversely, those who rode to the side of it were not the right ones and should be turned away. As the appointed time approached, the eldest prince decided to claim the princess and the kingdom. Upon reaching the palace and seeing the magnificent golden road, he thought it would be wrong to tread upon it, and instead rode to the right side. When he reached the door, the servants told him he was not the right suitor and sent him away. Shortly after, the second prince attempted the same. Approaching the golden road, he thought it would be shameful to mar its surface, so he rode to the left side. The attendants informed him, too, that he was not the right suitor and dismissed him. When the year had finally passed, the youngest son, eager to reunite with his beloved and leave his sorrows behind, set out from the forest. He thought of the princess constantly and was so eager to be with her that he didn't even notice the golden road. His horse trotted right up the middle of it. Upon reaching the palace door, it opened, and the princess welcomed him with joy. She declared him her deliverer and the lord of the kingdom. Their wedding was celebrated with great joy and festivity. After the celebrations, she informed him that his father had invited him to return and had forgiven him. The prince then rode to his father and recounted everything, how his brothers had betrayed him and how he had kept silent. The old king, filled with anger, wished to punish them, but the brothers had fled to the sea and never returned. Dr. Know-All, a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there was a poor peasant named Crab who took a load of wood to the town with 2 oxen and sold it to a doctor for 2 thalers. While the doctor counted out the money, he was sitting at his table eating a meal. When the peasant saw how elegantly the doctor dined, he yearned for the same lifestyle and wished he could be a doctor too. After contemplating for a moment, he finally asked if he could also become a doctor. "Certainly," said the doctor. "That can be arranged quickly." "What must I do?" asked the peasant. "First, buy yourself an ABC book, the kind that has a cock on the front. Second, sell your cart and your 2 oxen and use the money to buy clothes and other things necessary for a doctor. Third, have a sign made that reads, 'I am Dr. Know-All,' and nail it above your front door." The peasant followed these instructions diligently. After practicing as a doctor for a short while, a rich and influential lord had some money stolen. Hearing about Dr. Know-all, who lived in a nearby village and supposedly knew everything, the lord had his carriage prepared and drove to see Crab. "Are you Dr. Know-all?" the lord asked. "Yes, I am," Crab replied. "Then you must come with me and find the stolen money," the lord commanded. "Of course," Crab agreed, "but my wife Greta must come too." The lord consented and let them both sit in the carriage, and they all set off together. When they arrived at the nobleman's castle, the table was set for a meal, and Crab was invited to sit and eat. "Yes, but my wife Greth must join us too," he insisted, and they both took their seats. As the first servant brought in a dish of fine food, Crab nudged his wife and said, "Greta, that was the first," meaning it was the first dish. However, the servant misunderstood and thought Crab meant, "That is the first thief." Being guilty, he became terrified and whispered to his colleague outside, "The doctor knows everything. We are in trouble. He just said I was the first." The second servant, now reluctant, was forced to go in. As he entered with his dish, Crab nudged his wife again and said, "Greta, that is the second." This terrified the servant just as much, and he quickly left. The third servant fared no better, for Crab repeated, "Greta, that is the third." The fourth servant carried in a covered dish, and the lord asked the doctor to demonstrate his skill by guessing what was beneath the cover. Crab looked at the dish, unsure what to say, and exclaimed, "Oh, poor Crab." When the lord heard this, he shouted, "There, he knows it! He knows who has the money!" The servants, now filled with fear, signaled to the doctor to step outside. When he did, all four confessed that they had stolen the money and offered to return it, along with a substantial sum if he kept their secret. They feared they would be hanged if he revealed their guilt. They then showed him where the money was hidden. Satisfied with this, the doctor returned to the hall, sat down at the table, and said, "My lord, I will now consult my book to find out where the gold is hidden." The fifth servant had hidden himself in the stove to listen if the doctor knew even more. Crab opened his ABC book, flipped through the pages back and forth, searching for the cock. Unable to find it immediately, he said, "I know you are there, so you better come out." Thinking the doctor was addressing him, the servant in the stove leapt out in terror, crying, "This man knows everything." Dr. Know-all then revealed to the Lord where the money was hidden, without identifying the thieves, and was rewarded generously by both sides. Thus, he became a renowned man. The Spirit in the Glass Bottle, a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there was a poor woodcutter who toiled from morning until late at night. Finally saving some money, he said to his son, "You are my only child. I want to invest the money I've earned through hard work in your education. Learn a respectable trade so you can support me in old age when my limbs grow stiff and I must stay at home." The boy went to university and studied diligently. His teachers praised him, and he stayed there for some time. After completing several courses, but still not perfect in all things, the small amount of money the father had saved was spent, and the boy had to return home. "Oh," said the father sadly, "I can't give you anything more, and in these difficult times, I can't earn a penny more than what's needed for our daily bread." "Dear father," replied the son, "don't worry. If it's God's will, things will turn out for the best. I'll manage." When the father said he was going to the forest to earn money by cutting firewood, the son said, "I'll go with you and help." "No, my son," said the father, "you'll find it too hard. You're not used to hard work, and I have only one axe left and no money to buy another." "Just go to the neighbor," answered the son. "He'll lend you his axe until I've earned enough to buy my own." So the father borrowed an axe from the neighbor, and the next morning at dawn, they went out into the woods together. The son helped his father and was very cheerful and lively. When the sun was directly overhead, the father said, "Let's rest now and have our midday meal. Then things will go twice as well." The son took his bread and said, "You rest, father. I'm not tired. I'll walk around the woods a bit and look for birds' nests." "Oh, you rascal," said the father. "Why do you want to roam around? Later you'll be tired and unable to lift a finger. Stay here and sit beside me." Yet the son ventured into the woods, where he ate his bread, remained cheerful, and peered into the verdant branches in search of a bird's nest. He wandered back and forth until he reached a colossal oak tree, surely hundreds of years old, that 5 men could not encircle. Standing before it, he pondered, "Surely many birds have nested in this tree." Suddenly, he thought he heard a voice. Listening closely, he discerned a muffled cry, "Let me out! Let me out!" He looked around, but saw nothing. Then he thought the voice emerged from below the ground, so he called out, "Where are you?" The voice replied, "I'm trapped down here among the oak roots. Let me out! Let me out!" The student began clearing away beneath the tree, searching among the roots, until he finally discovered a glass bottle in a small hollow. Lifting it up, he held it to the light and saw something resembling a frog jumping inside. "Let me out! Let me out!" it cried again, and the student, thinking no ill, removed the cork from the bottle. Immediately, a spirit emerged and began to expand. It grew so rapidly that within moments, a fearsome creature, half the size of the tree, stood before the student. "Do you know," it bellowed in a terrifying voice, "what your reward is for releasing me?" "No," replied the student boldly. "How would I know that?" "Then I will tell you," exclaimed the spirit. "I must break your neck for it." "You should have said so sooner," retorted the student, "for then I would have left you locked up inside. Nevertheless, my head will remain firmly attached until I've consulted others." "More people here, more people there," shouted the spirit. "You shall receive the reward you deserve. Do you think I was shut away there out of kindness? No, it was a punishment. I am the mighty Mercurius. Whomever releases me, I must break their neck." "Calm yourself," responded the student. "Not so fast. First, I must be certain you were truly confined in that little bottle, and that you are indeed the right spirit. If you can return inside, then I'll believe it, and you may do as you wish with me." The spirit arrogantly declared, "That's a simple trick," and compressed itself, becoming as thin and small as it had been before. It then squeezed back into the opening and through the bottle's neck. Hardly inside, the student swiftly replaced the cork and tossed the bottle back where it lay among the oak roots. Thus, the spirit was deceived. The student was about to return to his father when the spirit cried out pitifully, "Oh, do let me out! Oh, do let me out!" "No," answered the student, "not a second time. I will not release someone who once tried to kill me, now that I have captured him again." "If you will set me free," cried the spirit, "I will give you so much that you will have enough for all the days of your life." "No," answered the student, "you would cheat me as you tried to the first time." "You are forfeiting your own good fortune," said the spirit. "I will not harm you, but rather reward you generously." The student thought, "I will risk it. Perhaps he will keep his word, and in any case, he will not outwit me." So he removed the cork, and the spirit rose up from the bottle as before, expanding until he was as large as a giant. "Now you shall receive your reward," he said, handing the student a small rag that resembled a bandage. He explained, "If you rub a wound with one end, it will heal, and if you rub steel or iron with the other end, it will turn into silver." "I must test that," said the student. He approached a tree, scratched its bark with his axe, then rubbed it with one end of the bandage. Immediately, the wound closed and healed. "Now it works," he said to the spirit, "and we can part ways." The spirit thanked him for freeing him, and the student thanked the spirit for the gift, then returned to his father. "Where have you been wandering?" said the father. "Why have you neglected your work? I knew you wouldn't accomplish anything." "Don't worry, father. I will make up for it." "Make up for it indeed," said the father angrily. "Don't bother. Just watch, father. I will soon fell that tree there and make it crash." Then he took his bandage, rubbed the axe with it, and struck a powerful blow, but because the iron had turned into silver, the blade folded back on itself. "Hey, father, just look what a poor axe you've given me. It's all bent out of shape." The father was alarmed and said, "Oh, what have you done?" "Now I'll have to pay for the axe, and I don't know how. That's all the benefit I get from your work." "Don't be angry," said the son. "I will pay for the axe." "Oh, you fool," cried the father. "How will you pay for it? You have nothing except what I give you. You have students' tricks in your head, but you know nothing about chopping wood." After a little while, the student said, "Father, I can't work any longer after all. Let's quit for the day." "Very well," he answered. "Do you think I can stand around with my hands in my pockets like you? I have to keep working, but you may head for home. Father, this is my first time in these woods. I don't know my way alone. Please come with me. His anger had now subsided, so the father finally agreed to accompany him home. There he said to his son, "Go and sell the damaged axe and see what you can get for it. I will have to earn the difference to pay back the neighbor." The son took the axe and went into town to a goldsmith, who tested and weighed it, then said, "It is worth 400 talers. I don't have that much cash with me." The student said, "Give me what you have. I will lend you the rest." The goldsmith gave him 300 talers and owed him 100. Then the student returned home and said, "Father, I have some money. Go and ask the neighbor what he wants for the axe." "I already know," replied the old man. "One taler, 6 groschens. Then give him 2 talers, 12 groschens. That is double its worth and is plenty. Look, I have more than enough money." Then he gave his father 100 talers, saying, "You shall never lack for anything. Live as you wish." "My goodness," exclaimed the old man, "where did you get all that money?" Then the son recounted everything that had happened, and how by trusting in his luck, he had made such a fortunate find. With the remaining money, he returned to the university and resumed his studies, and because he could heal any wound with his bandage, he became the most renowned doctor in the world. The Devil's Sooty Brother, a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. A disbanded soldier had nothing to live on and did not know how to get on. Venturing into the forest, after a short walk, he encountered a little man who, however, turned out to be the devil. Addressing him, the little man said, "What ails you? You seem very sorrowful." The soldier replied, "I am hungry, but I have no money." The devil proposed, "If you hire yourself to me and become my serving man, you shall have enough for all your life. Serve me for 7 years, and after that you shall be free again. But there is one condition. You must not wash, comb, or trim yourself, cut your hair or nails, or wipe the water from your eyes." Accepting reluctantly, the soldier said, "Very well, if there is no other choice," and went off with the little man, who promptly led him down into hell. There, the devil instructed him on his tasks. He was to tend the fires under the kettles where the hell broth stewed, keep the house clean, sweep all the sweepings behind the doors, and ensure everything was in order. However, if he peeped into the kettles, dire consequences would follow. Reassuring the devil, the soldier promised, "I will take care." With the old devil off on his wanderings again, the soldier began his duties, lighting the fire and sweeping the dirt well behind the doors as instructed. Upon the devil's return, he inspected everything, seemed satisfied, and departed once more. Surveying his surroundings, the soldier eyed the kettles encircling hell, simmering with a powerful fire underneath and boiling fiercely inside. He longed to peer inside them, but resisted, knowing the devil's strict prohibition. Eventually, unable to resist any longer, he lifted the lid of the first kettle slightly and looked inside, finding his former corporal imprisoned. "Aha, old bird!" he exclaimed. "Do I find you here? Once you had power over me, now I have you," swiftly closing the lid, stoking the fire, and adding a fresh log. Moving to the second kettle, he lifted its lid a little and saw his former ensign inside. "Aha, old bird! I discover you here. Once you had power over me, now I have you," he said, shutting the lid and fetching another log to intensify the heat. Curious about the occupant of the third kettle, he found it was a general. "Aha, old bird! Do I find you here? Once you had power over me, now I have you," he declared, using the bellows to make the hellfire blaze under him. Thus he served his 7 years in hell without washing, combing, or trimming himself, cutting his hair or nails, or wiping the water from his eyes. The 7 years seemed so short to him that he thought it had only been half a year. When the time was up, the devil returned and asked, "Well, Hans, what have you done?" "I tended the fires under the kettles, and I swept all the dirt well behind the doors. But since you have peeped into the kettles as well, it is fortunate that you added fresh logs to them. Otherwise, your life would have been forfeited. Now that your time is up, will you go home again?" "Yes," said the soldier. "I should very much like to see what my father is doing at home." The devil replied, "In order to receive the wages you have earned, go and fill your knapsack full of the sweepings and take it home with you. You must also go unwashed and uncombed, with long hair on your head and beard, uncut nails and dim eyes. When asked where you come from, say from hell. And when asked who you are, say the devil's sooty brother and my king as well. The soldier remained silent, did as the devil instructed, but was not at all satisfied with his wages. Upon returning to the forest, he immediately took his knapsack from his back to empty it. However, upon opening it, the sweepings had turned into pure gold. I would never have expected that, he exclaimed, pleased, and entered the town. The landlord stood in front of the inn, and upon seeing the soldier, was terrified because Hans looked worse than a scarecrow. He called out and asked, "Where do you come from?" "From hell." "Who are you?" "The devil's sooty brother, and my king as well." The host refused to let him enter, but when Hans showed him the gold, he came and unlatched the door himself. Hans then ordered the best room in service, ate and drank his fill, but did not wash or comb himself as the devil had instructed, and finally lay down to sleep. However, the knapsack full of gold remained before the landlord's eyes, troubling him, and during the night he sneaked in and stole it away. The next morning, when Hans got up and wanted to pay the landlord and continue his journey, he found his knapsack was gone. However, he quickly composed himself and thought, "You have been unfortunate through no fault of your own," and immediately returned to hell, complaining of his misfortune to the old devil and begging for help. The devil said, "Sit down, I will wash, comb, and trim you, cut your hair and nails, and wash your eyes." When he had finished, he returned the knapsack full of sweepings to Hans and said, "Go and tell the landlord that he must return your money, or else I will come and fetch him, and he will poke the fire in your place." Hans approached the landlord and said, "You have stolen my money. If you do not return it, you will go down to hell in my place and look as horrible as I." Then the landlord returned the money and more, only asking Hans to keep it a secret, and now Hans was a wealthy man. He set out for home to his father, bought himself a shabby smock frock to wear, and wandered around making music, a skill he had learned while with the devil in hell. In that country, there was an old king before whom he had to play, and the king was so delighted with his playing that he promised him his eldest daughter in marriage. But when she heard she was to marry a common man in a smock frock, she said, "I would rather go into the deepest water than do that." So the king gave him the youngest daughter, who willingly agreed to please her father, and thus the devil's sooty brother married the king's daughter. When the aged king died, the entire kingdom passed to him as well.